Oh
I
my
spilled
god.
my fruit gummies.
No, I'm so sorry, bro.
Oh my gosh.
Good luck.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lat Mackey, and this is Sequence Break, episode 25, the one, the only Brossentia.
Hello.
How you doing, bro?
Oh, I guess I'm okay, just in case you didn't hear, I'm eating fruit gummies, everybody.
And apparently some of them are on the floor right now.
Yeah. I think I need to get them before we vacuum. The vacuum wouldn't be too happy about that.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time. I'm super excited to talk with you. For those of you who haven't ever watched a Brossentia stream, let me just highly recommend it before we even start this episode. They're highly entertaining, and you will almost always find a game perhaps that you may not have heard of before. I mean, you play so many different games on your streams. One of the things that struck me right away about your stream is the variety of games you bring to it.
Yeah, I was going to say, usually they end up on the lesser known side, the sort of occult of video games, the ones that you wouldn't necessarily expect to show up on any stream, or those that have been lost in time and space. They got Lovecrafted and just absolutely forgotten.
And I appreciate the affection that you bring to them. Like, these are games that, they need love too. These games, every game, there was a game for somebody. That's the way I feel about it. There's like always a game for somebody out there,
Yeah, the thing is, I've quickly found out that games that I can enjoy, even if they're bad, are not always ones that everybody else can enjoy, even though they're bad. It's like, I don't know, when it comes to bad video games, everybody has their own taste for what they'll be able to tolerate, and what I tolerate, you might not. You might not at all.
That's totally fair, and I appreciate the disclaimer. Going into it. Let's take this back a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your origin story. Like, when did you start playing video games? What are kind of your first experience with it?
Well, back when I was a young kid, I'm trying to think. Because one of my earliest memories was getting an NES. I believe I was 5 years old or something like that. But I know that my dad had an Atari before that, specifically an Atari 800 XL with a floppy drive. And I ended up playing a lot of those old school games. I love Jungle Hunt. I love Joust. I love... What else was on it?
I'm not familiar with the 800 that had a disc drive. I've never heard of that. That's crazy.
Dude, yeah, it was the best. Yeah, Pitfall, Joust.
Oh, yeah, of course. The classics.
Yeah, Millipede. A lot of the classics. Every once in a while, there was something that was really charming to me, like the game Firebug. That actually came in a magazine that people would enter. They had to sit down and type out all of the code in order to get it on their computer. But it was short enough that it was actually doable. And I found some of those games just playing that I absolutely love, and found out, hey, this was probably somebody, I don't think a relative, because my relatives are lazy, but somebody sat down and typed it out and then just copied from floppy to floppy to floppy until it got to us.
And there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned the Atari, because in my family we didn't have it, but we had the VIC-20, which was a kind of a cheap knockoff of an Atari product,
Mm-hmm.
But Qbert and Pitfall are some of the big games that I remember from that era. I mean, just
you like Qbert?
It was the game we had. It had colors back then. That was a big deal.
Whatever. The Atari had all the colors.
Well, that's a fair point.
Usually flashing at your eyes. It wasn't. That's why I wear glasses these days, because of the Atari.
Well, I totally understand that. Did you, the interesting variety of games, were you interested in playing the variety of games back then and exploring some games that maybe not your friends or siblings weren't playing or anything like that?
I think back then, largely, Atari games were interesting, but extremely short. So usually about 5 minutes into playing one, you're like, I'm already bored. Let's go ahead and switch to something else. And so because we had all of these floppies with tons and tons and tons of games of them, we could just flip through, try something for a hot minute or two, flip to something else. And that's basically how I got to discover games that I loved and games that I hated.
It's a great way to. I mean, it's fortunate, that sometimes I know some people that their family maybe only had one game for that week or for that month or something like that. So to have a variety of games it's nice that you could experience some of those other games at that time period, especially that young.
Oh yeah, for sure. With the NES, it wasn't at all like that. Go down to the old Radio Shack and borrow. I'm serious, okay? We borrowed games from Radio Shack.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Borrowed.
No. You rented, okay?
Wait, Radio Shack had a rental program?
Well, ours did.
Okay,
I don't think this was exactly curated by the national. They didn't have, big Radio Shack executive being like, nah, we need video games. We need to get them out there. Get them out there to the children. No. But ours did, because we were in a small town and there just weren't a lot of options. There was one other store that would rent games, and that was it. Radio Shack was able to undercut them. Yeah, they didn't have as many options, but they definitely had the price point.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because the older I get, the more fortunate how I live in Southern California, and we had a rental store on every corner. You could go rent games or rent videos from almost any other place. So I realized how fortunate that was that we were able to experience all these other games and all this other, we had it available to us.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, to be fair, the video game store did have a decent amount of options. That's how I got to experience Rocky and Bullwinkle for the NES first.
Oh,
and then we ended up taking it back early because I thought it was broken.
It was that bad?
Yeah, it was pretty bad. Even kid me knew that the game was absolutely intolerable. Absolutely not okay.
So I'm curious, as a kid, were you the type of kid, did you like playing the games to completion? It sounds like you liked the variety. So did you ever beat many games as a kid?
Oh, I sucked. Really bad. So very, very rarely. The thing is, a lot of the platformers were extremely difficult. I do remember beating DuckTales 2 as a kid. And one of the first games that I completed as well was Mega Man 2. But we own Mega Man 3. I couldn't get through that. It's extremely difficult. I mean, that's sort of what the NES difficulty was. If you rented a game, they wanted to make sure that you had a hard time beating it so that you would either rent it again or most likely go and buy it if you liked it.
I've never heard it described that way, but I wonder, is that why NES games are so difficult? Is that part of the difficulty?
Yeah, if you ever play an NES game and get to a point where there's a really solid wall where it goes whoop up in difficulty, a lot of the times, yes, that was there to expand the gameplay. That was there specifically to make it so that you got more time for your money. Yeah.
Oh,
that's
man.
largely why they were so difficult, to encourage you to buy them so you could spend more time to complete them.
I definitely understand, and I understand the business models and plans that go into games. So, but to hear it described, that I never even thought of that. But that actually makes perfect sense. It actually answers a lot of questions I have, because I've been going recently. I've been going back and playing some of the games that I couldn't beat as a kid. Castlevania 1, Mike Tyson's Punch Out is what I'm doing right now, and it's like, man, how the difficulty ramps up really fast.
Oh, yeah. I'd say that the first ring in Punch-Out is relatively trivial. And then after that, it's trial and error figuring out what you can do in order to beat each of the bosses. I've still never beaten... Well, we didn't have Mike Tyson. We had Mr. Dream.
The poor man's Mike Tyson.
The poor man's Mike Tyson. Yeah.
It's a tough fight. I've put about 2.5 hours in. I still haven't beat Tyson, and I've like the guys who do it blindfolded make it look, Zallard and Sinister make it look so easy, but it's not easy. I'll tell you that right now.
Oh yeah, I have finally beaten the stupid Mr. Macho Man or whatever his name is. And I remember so many times as a kid getting knocked out and him just flexing his pecs as the countdown goes down. And I'm like, why would he do this to me? Why? He was just so incredibly difficult.
Even at 37 years old, when he starts laughing at you, it still hurts. I'm not going to lie. I got laughed at a lot of this game as I went down a bunch, and I'm like, this is mean. It's just flat out mean.
Oh, it's totally cruel. absolutely unfair.
So when did you first then start discovering speedrunning? Like, how was your introduction? What were some of the things that got you, like, when did you first hear about a speedrun?
Well, honestly, it's because of my sister. Back, I believe, between 2005 and 2007, that was when I was in Brazil. Long story short, back then I was a Mormon and a missionary, and I was out there being like, yo, hey, let's forsake all technology and live in some really crappy houses and go around and talk to people about religion. And Essentia, in the meantime, was like, ooh, video games. Brosentia's not here, and now I have all his games. And she discovered speedrunning, specifically the Speed Demos Archive forums, and started doing them. And one of the first projects that she worked on, I believe, was Final Fantasy IX, a segmented run, which actually held the record for a really, really long time. A lot of people basically didn't believe that RPGs could be speedrun at that time because of how long they would take. And she did it because I don't know. It's like, well, I have kids and I need to find a way to keep myself entertained. I'm going to just sit for hours with video games and let my husband take care of them for once. So when I got back, after I finished my bachelor's degree, I was living in my sister's house. She goes by Essentia, and they ended up hosting SGDQ there. And about a month before, she came to me and was like, hey, Brian, do you want to run a game for the marathon? And I was like, I've never done a speed run before, but sure. Yeah, let's do this. And she's like, okay, what game? And I'm like, it's a game where you go fast. Mirror's Edge is a game where you go fast. Let's go ahead and do that. I had a month to learn this game, and it's not trivial. It still happened. I still did the run. It's just I was not exactly the best at it. It ended up being fine, though. It was a blast.
Well, since you brought it up, a lot of those early GDQ runs seemed a bit more, I want to say casual, because that's not the right term, but they were, they weren't the best, they weren't the world record holders in those games at the time, which I thought was real interesting about some of those early runs.
Well, I mean, GDQ originally started as a community thing, and charity was sort of an afterthought when they actually made the marathon. They were like, if we're going to be sitting around and playing games for this long, we might as well see if we can do some sort of charity. So they got it set up, and it ended up being a lot more successful than they expected. So I would say that at this point, it's definitely much more charity focused, but before it was largely a combination between community coming together and doing the charity. And, part of me misses that. I really feel like a lot of events have forgotten the idea of the community and bringing people together.
So it's funny you mentioned that, because the previous episode to this one was with Spike Vegeta, and I was showing the video from Essentia's house, your sister's house, and you can see the kids running around and everything, and there really is this sense of community. Even from very early on, like that seemed like it was one of the foundations or one of the reasons, like it just seemed like a great gathering of people, for us watching.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's what it was. A whole bunch of people getting together, hanging out, sleeping on the floor, playing video games together. Essentia's husband out there making food for everybody, flipping pancakes and cooking up bacon. They were good times, honestly.
If you don't mind me asking, so was that kind of your first experience with the speedrunning community, or had you, because I'm curious if you had known anything about speedrunning before your sister came to you and asked you to do something?
I watched one of the marathon videos. I think I actually won a prize from the original Classic Games Done Quick for a donation, So I did watch them on occasion. I was like, oh, there's Essentia, off having fun with her nerdy friends. And eventually, I don't think I would have really joined the speedrunning community at all if it didn't happen at my sister's house.
That's well, I'm glad it did. And that's so awesome. So Mirror's Edge you brought up. What was trying to learn to speedrun that game? What was like what's it like trying to learn a speedrun for the first time?
Well, at first I was like, let me just go ahead and play this on my own and see how that's going to go, see if I can develop any techniques. And then I was like, wow, this is pretty much the worst to learn. And I have a very limited amount of time. So I went and found, oh my gosh, I think it was Oven Donkey's runs of the individual levels. You know, he never put together a full run up until that point, but was essentially showing how to do each level individually. And so I went, I watched, I played, I watched, I played, and just learned level by level after what he was doing. You know, I had very little innovation when it came to that run because I just needed to learn something.
So that's interesting. That's uncommon. I haven't heard somebody being thrust into a speedrun such as that. When did you finally at some point get an opportunity to speedrun a game that you like wanted to, that you were excited about, or that you was a little more passionate about than perhaps what that you were just trying to find?
Well, I mean, I know that the next year I ran two different games. One was Athena for the NES, and the other one was Little Big Planet for the PlayStation 3. And Little Big Planet was one that I was genuinely interested in. I was able to find some new strats that other people never had used. I actually felt like I was able to add some stuff to that run. So honestly, I think that was the biggest enjoyable one early on. You know, the year after that I ran Final Fantasy IV, and that ended up being a huge one for me. I absolutely love it. And oh crap, I need to return to that like today.
Wow, still running it today, huh?
Well, I mean, I've had a few years of a break, but yeah, I think I'm supposed to run it for something next week, so I gotta de-rust real quick. You know, it's okay. It's just an RPG. You know, a week's enough.
Of course, hours, however long many hours you're gonna put into that game. I just need a week to de-rust it. No problem at all.
Oh, I mean, after you learn a run, it's a lot easier to relearn it. You know, so I just gotta brush it off. That's what I got to do.
If you don't mind me asking, so I think RPGs are an interesting thing for speedrunning because they're, for me, as a platformer most of the time, but RPG is my favorite type of genre of game to play of all time. Zelda, Final Fantasies, all of them. I love them all.
Okay.
And the amount of time you have to put into learning an RPG speedrun is intimidating. And I'm curious if there's any, you know, how have you developed like getting this, because you have a full-time job, like how do you find the time to speedrun any RPG, nonetheless Final Fantasy IV?
I mean, technically right now I'm streaming full-time, so luckily it's a little bit easier these days. However, back when I was doing Final Fantasy IV, I was going to grad school, I believe, full-time. Also, you know, I was teaching during that time. I had another side gig going on. I've had too many jobs at the same time. Okay, don't do that to yourself. And yeah, at that time, I was trying to learn Final Fantasy IV, and I don't know how I did it. But generally, what I did in order to make it easier was I found somebody else's notes. I had them send them over to me, and I knew some things that I wanted to add into the run because I found something that was a really huge glitch in the game. And so what I did was essentially took their notes, learned how it went, made changes specifically for what I wanted to do with the run, and then ended up putting it all together. There were quite a few things that ended up saving a good amount of time. And yeah, I'd say that if somebody has done a run before, steal. Okay, stealing is the best thing when it comes to speed runs.
Well, okay, I totally agree with you, by the way. I have like very, very few of my own original strats for any game I've ever run. But one thing you touched upon, and I think, is that you reached out to a member of the community to help with some notes and stuff like that. That comes up time and time again, is participating or connecting with people who already run the game, because most of us are passionate about the games we run, you know, and we're all about sharing that type of information and stuff. You say stealing, I say sharing. It's like the same thing, right?
Well, people steal from me, it's fine.
Right, exactly.
You know, steal, everybody. that's sort of the thing with speedrunning, the sense of community again. Returning to that, many of the video game communities do put a lot of work in order to develop strats and notes and such. RPG communities definitely have a lot of documents if you want to get really down into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, no, Doug Developer in the chat says borrowing, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? It's all the same words. We're very much the information's out there, so it's not like you can gatekeep it anyway. So
yeah, I'd say if at all possible, give people credit.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at the same time, there are some strats that I've probably done in games that were first found by some person who lived in the 1800s or something. I have no idea who this ancestor of video game speedrunning is, but I still use it,
So nowadays you still I still see you picking up new games and new speedrun stuff. Do you have any sort of process or like how you decide that you're going to choose a game to speedrun nowadays?
The most common thing for me is finding a game that either doesn't have any speed runs to it or has speed runs, but I'm able to find something that I can see is an improvement. I'm really interested in exploring new glitches and exploring new ground that other people haven't done before. So in general, that's what I go after. Mind you, I also usually focus on bad games. Games that make me laugh. As long as I'm still having fun with it, then I definitely like to play it even more.
That's a great approach. I love it. I think it's so awesome. We talked about it just a little bit before, but I'd like to bring it up again. Games Done Quick and kind of your long history with it. As it started to become, when you first participated in Games Done Quick, did you ever see it becoming the juggernaut that it is nowadays as far as a speedrunning event goes?
I think with HDDQ, considering how small it was, I think by the second year, just because there was a huge amount of growth and we were still having it in Essentia's house, it started getting really cramped. And I think people did sort of foresee, yes, we're going to have to move to bigger venues. I'm not sure if we knew it would become the size that it is today. And honestly, I don't think we've reached the cap yet. It's still going to get bigger. Honestly, there are plenty of giant video game events out there, and we just have a teeny weeny percentage of all the people who attend going to those because of the big caps that we have for the various registration. But yeah, I don't think we've hit the peak yet. It's still to come.
I'm glad to hear you say that because when I attended GDQX this year and it was at TwitchCon, as soon as you go into like the main place where all the other Twitch stuff is going on, you realize how small and how tiny the speedrunning community is and how tiny the GDQ is compared to the gajillions of things that are, everything else. It was humbling and pretty interesting to see, especially because I don't venture out of the speedrunning community very much, or the retro community off of Twitch. So little did I know there's all these other games that are just huge and big and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, like you do have a couple of the giant names in speedrunning, obviously who run some of the games that are a lot more popular, but a lot of these little niche corners that we have with speedruns, with games that either nobody knows or nobody plays anymore these days, that there's such a small percentage of the gaming world that's invested in that. At the same time, I think more people are getting exposed to the fact that people are exploring these new, janky, strange games out there. It's growing right now.
Absolutely. And I'm always surprised, but I shouldn't be surprised when I meet teenagers or kids in their early 20s who are picking up these speedruns and stuff like that. It's not just for people of my age who, the nostalgia factor. Like these games present an interesting challenge to young people as well as myself, who might be just a little bit older than the Overwatch player.
I sort of think with that, especially with NES games, they're very easy to follow. They're very easy to see what happens. And because there are a lot of strats already, I'd say they're pretty welcoming for new players, a lot of them at least. You're not going to get a perfect run, sure. You're not going to get the hardest strats, but they're usually smaller easier strats that don't lose a lot of time, So I tend to think especially platformers are very welcoming to new players.
Totally agree. And one of the things I notice all the time is like the Celeste leaderboards. I think there's over 1,000 people who've submitted a Celeste speedrun. And essentially that's like a 16-bit era type game, with just, but it's so compelling. It's very captivating, a game like that is, hits on the nostalgia vibe, but hits on stuff for new gamers and all that kind of stuff.
I'd say that Celeste is one of those prime examples of something that holds onto old school difficulty, but does it in a way that is forgiving. Right. A lot of the older games, if you died, you had a long death animation. You had a long time to get back into the level. And, a lot of the times you lose 2 or 3 minutes because of one small mistake. Celeste, what do you lose? Like 3 seconds? Yeah. And then you're right back into the game. That's
why it's such a perfect, I don't say perfect, but it's such a good speed run. And I have never attempted it myself, but because you can there's always something you can improve upon, there, as far as I know, there hasn't been the perfect run. I mean, there's still people running it, at the highest of levels. So.
Oh yeah. And it's mostly that level of forgiveness that even if you die, you are not out of it. You're not out of a race. You still can make a personal best. I feel like that makes Celeste essentially one of the perfect speedruns out there.
Completely agree with you. Completely agree. So tying this back a little bit to some of that GDQ stuff. When did you start streaming around this time that you started to participate? Like when did you start the whole streaming thing?
Okay, so yes, I did. On Essentia's channel, actually, on her Twitch channel, I started doing a little bit of streaming, practicing up for SGDQ. I believe I was doing Mirror's Edge and a little bit of Little Big Planet after SGDQ happens. And then finally, I made my own. I believe it was still over on Justin TV before they changed to Twitch TV. Yeah, I would stream over there. And then I started getting involved on SDA. PJ would run a bad video game exchange there, right? And I was like, I want to participate in this. I want to give somebody a bad game and get a bad game in exchange. So the game that I prepared to give away was The Wizard of Oz Super Nintendo, because it's bad. Oh, it's so bad. It's so bad. And the basic rule was that you couldn't send a game unless you had actually beaten it.
Oh, that's fair. That's a good rule. Yeah.
So because the person who received it would have to speed run it. Right. And have to deal with that. So I spent a good several days trying to beat Wizard of Oz, and it's so hard, but I finally did it, and I sent it. The person who got it was Dragon Dark, and he sent me NES Athena. And let's just say that Athena was a special time in my life. Because back then, I ended up moving away from Essentia's house and moving into an apartment with some other people out in Logan, some friends. And there were times where I just sat alone trying to get a recording of Athena. I practiced on stream, but I didn't have a capture card or anything. So when I actually did run attempts, I just sat at the TV on my own playing Athena. And there were times that I played it for like 6 hours straight trying to get the run. And in fact, I think that the time that I finally got a run that was worth submitting to SDA was after about 12 hours of gameplay. And with Athena, that's not good. Okay, that damages you, and it breaks you.
Okay. Dog brought it up in the chat. What makes Athena so bad?
What makes Athena so bad? Okay. So the original Athena was an arcade game put out in Japan, and the company that made it was like, hey, we need to contract this developer to make it for NES because people are going to love it. The arcade game wasn't any good either. But yeah, they made a port to the Nintendo. Unfortunately, the company was extremely crappy. By that, if you look at any of the games that they made, I can't remember their name, but if you look at any of the other games that they made or ported, they were all sort of traumatizing games. And they made Athena. So Athena's main problems How many can I name?
I'm watching a video of it. This looks really rough.
Okay, let's say bad frame rate, bad animation, lag is really terrible. Oh, if you move from there are 2 layers to the stage. If you move from the upper layer to the bottom one, it takes time. The screen goes black and then loads the second area in. If you go from the bottom stage and fall into a pit, you go back to the beginning of the stage, but it doesn't always count as you dying.
Oh my God.
The bosses are extremely difficult. Oh, and also, unless you know how to get it iframes, you don't have any. If you're just sitting there, you pretty much just get comboed to death. Archers, for some reason, if they shoot you and you're ducking, they one-shot you a lot of the times, or just destroy you. Oh, and also when you take damage, you can lose items that you've collected, including key items that are needed to beat certain areas. Oh, and also if you get to the world of hell, which is after the world of ice, there was an item that you had to collect in the world of ice in order to beat the world of hell. And if you die, you lose all your items, which means that you are essentially softlocked for the entire game. You literally cannot beat the game without resetting in order to get through that. Because guess what? You can't go back to previous levels to collect the key items that you lose from dying. What else? There are some bosses that require a specific weapon to use, and there's no indication that the weapon you have is not working. There is a maze level, okay? There's a maze level that you have to go through, and it doesn't tell you this in the game, but you have to get to the end with a harp, but not any harp. You have to get the right harp, not the cursed harp, because if you get the cursed harp, you have to do the maze again.
Oh, jeez.
But it doesn't tell you any of this, okay? Finally, you get through all of this crap. Honestly, nobody gets through it without having some sort of guide that tells them what to do. Okay, even Mexican Runner, who was very insistent, I think it took him 30 or 40 hours to beat this platformer, and he had to ask for help because it's just so incredibly cryptic. You are not going to beat it without some sort of help. Finally, the final boss has 3 flying heads that just combo you, and you have to. And if you get to the final boss and you don't have the correct harp, you can't kill it, and there's no indication why you can't. It's so bad. Okay, it is so incredibly bad. You need to go play this.
Yeah, it sounds like a game. I got to tell you, the way you're describing it, it sounds like the worst game I've ever heard of.
I have a hard time thinking of a game that is more anger-inducing than Athena.
This is interesting.
It's just so high up there.
Felt up in the chat says it's rumored the development company was rumored to just be one guy. That sounds kind of crazy too.
Yeah, Micronix, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they also made Miracle Rocket, if you're familiar with that game. It's also another game that literally made me throw my controller. I do not throw controllers, okay? I am a very calm, sophisticated person. But, I threw that on the ground because I was so angry.
Oh my god! I'm looking at the leaderboard too, and there's actually 3 people who have submitted a run to this game. That's quite amazing, actually.
To which one?
To Athena.
Athena. Yeah, I think Dragon Dark has passed me on that. I don't care. Hey, bro. You're gonna have that, yeah.
You're not gonna grind that game out again, bro? So you're saying?
Look, I don't know if he goes and actually gets a run done of Wizard of Oz one of these days. The game that I gave you years ago, Dragon Dark. Years. It's been years.
Called out.
Yeah, if you do that, I'll go ahead and beat your run for Athena. Whatever.
Oh, I love it, man. But I mean, that's what I don't know. I appreciate the games like this exist, but maybe some of them, I don't know. It's nice that we started off this conversation by saying, hey, there's games for everyone. I'm not sure this game is for everyone. If there's somebody out there for this game.
No, I'd honestly say that this game isn't for anyone. Like it's really, really terrible. But the thing is, because I was doing a deal that he would speedrun a game, I would speedrun a game, game, and we did the exchange, I felt like I needed to do it. And honestly, it sort of is fascinating to go into a game that you're like, I absolutely hate this. Let's find the best way to beat this and just get this project back behind me. I would not recommend that for everybody who does speedruns.
Sure.
It ended up getting me involved in the bad game community. And even through all the crap, there's some joy about being able to look back and laugh at how terrible that piece of game was.
That's a very good point. At least we have those memories. We will have the memories of it. I can't remember if I remember hearing you say this on stream or somewhere else, but you mentioned something about streaming being this performance platform. You get a chance to, explore some avenues of your personality and things like that maybe you might not otherwise. And I've noticed that watching your stream, you really bring that to the stream, and it's entertaining to watch and stuff like that. Could you maybe describe a little bit if you've got some background on that, or just something you've always enjoyed doing, and why that ends up on your stream?
Well, I mean, ever since high school, I was really interested in acting. I mean, I guess I was in the middle school play, Hey George, and I can't remember the other one that I was in, but I'm just trying to remember how the song goes. Do 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 do. When I saw that dragon, da, da, da. Yeah, it was a really crappy play, and
sounds wonderful. Sounds like a great video game. I'm just kidding.
No. It wasn't the best. But then junior high, I did more acting. Got to high school, and I got really involved with the improv club. And that's sort of because I don't think I had a personality really before high school. I'm not gonna lie, I was very monotone and very boring, and I loved math and school. I was the quintessential nerd, but I got involved in improv, and I realized that there's some power to making other people laugh. When I got to college as well, we started a troupe. We actually had some paid performances that we did. So I guess technically I was a professional. As soon as you receive any money,
you're pro.
You're a professional at that point. Oh, yeah. And streaming in a way became that to me as well. Obviously when you first start out, there are very few people watching you. I think it's a lot easier to grow quickly these days, but back then, hitting 10 people watching was a lot of work. But, so I just kept playing these games, probably having things that weren't super exciting because I was exploring what I really enjoyed putting on. And eventually I settled into a point where, I just enjoyed more than playing a game that I liked, playing a game that would make other people laugh. I guess that's what I've always wanted to do. I wanted to entertain people and make them happy. I feel like I'm still being genuine to myself when I do that. And that's something that is really important to me as well. Not just going out there and acting. It's going out there and doing something that, I would probably enjoy doing on my own anyway.
That's come up a couple of different times for, especially for streamers who are doing this full time, is finding your own voice and kind of being true to yourself while doing the performance and also doing the speed, doing all these things all at once and stuff like that. And that's interesting that even for yourself, it took some time to find that and develop it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think back at that time, oh, geez, it was hard to even find ways to build a community, because speedrunning had its own community over at SDA, but yeah, it took a long time for us to find people who liked watching bad video games and liked watching the punishment that they issued out. So yeah, it took a lot of work.
It's interesting you mentioned the niche too, the niche, because I run TurboGrafx 16 games, so I'm a niche within a niche within a niche. The smaller you get. But that being said, I am so fortunate that I have found a community that is into the same stuff I am. This is the bad games as well. It's like you're right.
It's the TurboGrafx.
I know. Dang it! But you bring up a really good point though because we are finding ourselves, the community is growing. There's more people in the pot, so you might find more people that are interested in the stuff that you're interested in as well.
Yeah, honestly, that's a lot of what I wanted to do, and that ended up helping me start the bad video game tournament that I put on, Kusogrande, because I wanted to find a way to bring more people into bad video games and give them experiences that they had never had before. And even better, I don't have to play them.
Right.
So, yeah, one day it was about 4 or 5 years ago, I was sitting around thinking, I would love to put on a show to bring people together and have them experience some of these games, because there are so many bad games out there, just dumpsters full. Okay. And finally, I just realized what I can do is put on this show. It took about 15 minutes of planning. I put together Google Docs and sent it online. Honestly, I had no idea that it would be going after 1 year. I thought it would be a one and done thing, but it's.
What was the first game played on Kusogrande?
Oh my gosh. Look, I'm going to have to look this up. Just a second.
No problem.
Okay, I've got the document here. Don't panic. Back to the Future, NES.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Classic. That's a great one to start with.
Yep. Then Wizard of Oz for Super Nintendo, followed by RoboCop 3 for the Super Nintendo as well.
Never played that one, but I love it.
Well, don't.
Okay, we've definitely getting some questions about Kusogrande. So how did the name come about? How did you name the...
I was trying to think of a name that would work for the tournament, and I actually asked Twitter. I'm like, I want to put on a bad video game tournament. I don't want to have something that just sounds boring. Any ideas? And I can't even remember who it was. There was just some random person on Twitter. It was like Kusogrande, and I'm like, this is perfect. This is perfect because it's a portmanteau of kuso or kusoge, which is generally bad video games. It's also a swear in Japanese.
Oh,
yeah.
Dual purposes. There you go. Perfect.
And I'm like, this is going to be a PG-13 stream, but whatever. The title can have a swear in it.
There you go.
Cool. And then grande, Spanish for big. And simply put, making a portmanteau of two words from two different languages was probably the most disgusting thing that I had heard. And I thought it was perfect.
Did it start out as a race or as a competition between players, or was it something different in the early going?
Oh no, it was still in the race format. In general, the winners bracket, they had to play 2 hours instead of one, which is what we generally do now. So 2 hours in a game, and then whoever went to the losers bracket, they all played bootlegs. The losers bracket was 100% bootleg. It's so good.
Quasi asks a good question. What defines a bad game? It's a fair question, but
it depends. Okay, because
right?
No.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and say that there are objective ways to determine whether a game is good or bad. And let me just say that there's a difference between bad and unenjoyable and then bad and enjoyable. And mostly, I think when people think of bad video games, they just think low quality or, something that they didn't spend much time on. And that generally isn't the case. A lot of the times, a lot of work is put into these games, but there are big deadlines. So the biggest thing that I dislike when it comes to bad video games are the ones that end up being mediocre. That is, the gameplay is very formulaic, very boring, and it generally ends up not being too interesting to watch. And then bad games that end up being more enjoyable are the games that actually tried something new and horribly failed at it. Those I think are genuinely enjoyable. If you think about Athena being ported from arcade to NES, on arcade it had many systems that generally weren't found in old school NES games because they were complicated. So figuring out how to crack those apart and fit those into an older console, they failed absolutely terribly, and they failed with the music, and everything about it is pain. But at the same time, there's something intriguing about how bad it was put together. Another game like that, Kid Cool for the NES, but created by Vic Tokai. That game specifically has physics that you will never find in any other NES video game. And the reason is that they're really bad, but they tried something new. And honestly, it's one of the fastest paced video games. When you play it well, it's one of the fastest paced video games on the NES.
I think that's actually I agree. Okay, I appreciate that is some objective criteria for defining kind of what fits into that genre. How do you choose the games for Kusogrande?
Well, I used to choose them. Back when I first started, I think honestly, I went through and combed through a lot of the old AVGN video games. Angry Video Game Nerd. He really had fun ranting about these crappy games, and it was a good place to start. Once I started getting to the second tournament, I looked to other sources. I went Googling, searching through lots of people's lists, occasionally just picking out a game and seeing what it felt like. But it still mostly remained on the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Game Boy, with a few other, or Game Gear, Genesis, whatever it's called.
That thing.
Game Boy, Genesis, same
Mega
thing.
Something, whatever.
Yeah. It was the third year, though, that I decided it would probably help to have some other people coming in and bringing in new types of games. And honestly, that's the first year that we had game masters who had their own curated list and sent out games. And that is when we really started getting some huge variety. At this year, I'm trying to think the different platforms that we've had in Kusogrande 4 and 5, because almost every console that you can think of, we've dug a little bit into it. We've had TurboGrafx, we've had Sega CD, we've had, I think we even had the VIC. We had TI-99, okay? The personal home computer TI-99. We had the mobile Gamecom, okay, put together by Tiger Electronics, the mobile Gamecom. We've had a game from that. So, yeah, just simply, but I'm always surprised.
I do have to appreciate, because I have seen TurboGrafx 16 in the most recent iterations of Kusogrande, which is great. But you're right, the variety of platforms now has become quite a bit. How does one participate? I noticed, and it seems like there are a bunch of people participating in the most recent iteration. How does it work?
Yeah, there are a lot of people. So generally, I think around the end of the year, we do this once a year. Around the end of the year, I have a submission form that I put out on Twitter. I talk about it on Twitch all the time and also on the Discord server. And people just send in their names and apply to be a part of the tournament. And I try to keep things as low stress as possible for the players. If they can't play on a certain day, that's fine. They can do another day, especially early on, because the tournament runs most of the year.
Well,
we're not really in a rush to get through all of these games.
Was there more than 100 people that signed up this year for 5?
170?
Oh my God. Jeez.
Yeah, there are a lot of people.
Wow. But that's awesome. I mean, anybody can participate. Or at least you've seen like anybody can participate. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, like as long as you have at least a potato that you can use to stream, then you're gonna be fine. We have some people in Australia's internet is basically the can and string type of internet that they've got. They got to shout the ones and zeros into the cup. But we still do that as long as they can get a stream live and their computer can run an emulator. In general, we're going to be okay with that. Yeah,
that's awesome that it's that open. Gong Zero says Apple II seems to be an untapped Kuso reservoir. Well, there you go. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, we haven't had Apple II, but I do know a couple games from Apple II that would work.
Be perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it sounds like it's not going to be slowing down anytime soon. And every match, I will say, is entertaining, whether it's from the gameplay, the people participating, the commentary. I think I only found Kusogrande during 4, so I'm a more recent viewer of Kusogrande, but the commentary is always awesome, too. You try to bring in people who know the game. Like, it's really interesting stuff.
We try to do research midstream, and then we always get distracted by something else. I don't know. Commentary this year has definitely been a little bit more out there than it has before, and it's not always related to the games, but we're always having fun. That's something that honestly is more on purpose than on accident. And here's why. A lot of tournaments that go on in speedrunning, I tend to think are boring. Because, how many times can you watch the same game over and over and over again?
Totally.
And there are some people who are really going to enjoy it, and then some people who are just like, I don't care about Link to the Past anymore, okay? All of my love is gone. My emotions are destroyed because of Link to the Past. But this, every hour match that we have, it's going to be something different. And that if we're bored, we're going to find something to talk about that's not going to be boring. And we're not going to just fake excitement. We will talk about how boring the game is, because some of them are. But, because the game masters are going through games, finding all of these strange gems, I love being surprised by games that I had no idea existed. So I'd say that is part of the charm. You don't have to know the game to understand what's going on, because guess what? The players don't know the game. To enter, you don't have to be highly skilled. A lot of the people who are entering, it's their first time to stream, really. They don't do anything else. And they know that they're probably not going to do well, but that's fine. The point is to participate, have fun, and after you get through that, you have a communal story within your group. 4 people who played the same terrible game have a little bit of that connection now. And it's all part of building the community around bad video games.
It's great. I so well said. And speaking about some of these events and things you're talking about, you have an affiliation, I would say, with RPG Limit Break. Can you tell us? Can you tell us a little bit about how what is it, and then how it kind of got started? Tell us a little bit about the story.
RPG Limit Break's a little bit more of a formal. You got to practice a bit for it.
You got to go put the professional face back on there, right?
Yeah. For $5.95, you can go ahead and get all of your RPGs broken. No, our RPG Limit Break specifically is a speedrunning marathon for RPGs. Obviously, they tend to be a little bit longer. Back several years ago, there was a marathon called Crystals for Life, and it ended up falling apart for a few reasons. I think a lack of organization was a large part of that, and people really wanted to have an RPG marathon still go on, but knew that it couldn't keep going from that one. So some of us came together. We put together a new one that started at Essentia's house again, because I guess that's the birthplace of marathon.
It has to be, apparently. If you're going to be successful, start your marathon at Essentia's house.
I was going to say, she has so many children that might as well have marathons as your children too,
Why not?
Anyways, so we came together, put on RPG Limit Break over at her house for a couple years, and ended up moving to some larger venues. That tends to generally focus on better games or games that people enjoy, although occasionally there are going to be bad video games in that marathon as well. It's been pretty successful as well. I can't remember the total that we hit last year. It was somewhere around $200,000 or $300,000 for the National Alliance on Mental Illness. But that has been fun, and I think that just because of where I was and who I was talking to at that time is largely why I got involved with that. Because I don't speedrun very many RPGs these days. They take too long, okay? They're so long. But at the same time, I love people's passion. And again, it was a large part of the community. The community wanted to keep an event going. And because I was related to Essentia and rather excited about Final Fantasy IV for a time, that's largely how I got involved in helping that come about.
Did it start? Was there a fundraising or charity aspect to it when it started? And how was that, or how and why is that important to the whole thing?
Oh, yeah, there certainly was. They knew that they wanted to do charity. In fact, they still wanted to carry on the charity from from the previous marathons, Crystal for Live. That would be with JDRF. But we started looking. I actually went and met with several different charities, and we met with the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And during that meeting, I actually found out that the person who was helping, who was the head over in Utah, was from my high school and actually graduated with me. And it was just so surreal, because I was like, you do not look at all like I knew you. I knew you before. You are nothing like what I thought you were. And it was a really cool way to reconnect with a friend. Not only that, but she ended up offering tons of things and tons of help in order to help this event take off. I think that is something that can sometimes be a little bit difficult. Charities are interested in the idea, but they don't really know how to help get the marathons kicked off. And she just threw everything at us to help.
That's pretty awesome. But I think it's interesting. Like but these are two Games Done Quick and RPG Limit Break. You've done a lot of participation with charity and finding these things.
Yeah.
Why is that important to you?
For me, I think that it depends on which charity you're talking about. Honestly, a large part of charity in general, and the reason why we reach out for a lot of charity, I think, is that a lot of people historically have viewed video game players as lazy people who aren't doing real things. And we wanted to find a way to give back and show, hey, we are putting a lot of work into this, but we want to be able to use this as a way to give back to the community and not just be, hey, these lazy people hanging around at home, sitting there and playing the latest Metroids. So that, I think, is one of the big inspirations for why it got started. NAMI in particular, though, is pretty important to me. I've got mental health issues. I've got ADHD. I've got PTSD. I've got a few things going on here. And honestly, it's something that because they're raising awareness and letting people know that, hey, these are things that a lot of people have, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Getting rid of the stigma and being able to talk about it openly has been huge for me. I've definitely talked about things on Twitter that have been going on in my mind and some of the changes. And I'm finally at a point where I'm mostly like, most days are good. And that's great. Yeah, because I couldn't say that maybe even a couple years ago. I couldn't say most days were good.
I appreciate you bringing that up, because you have mentioned your Twitter, and you've mentioned how treatment has helped you and how these things, it's been this journey for you, and you've shared some really stories that have really affected me personally. I've never suffered from anything that you have suffered from, but I've shared your stories with people I know who I'd rather not say who they are, but that are very close to me who have suffered from it. And it's interesting how it's helped them. And what kind of prompted you to be so public about this? Because these are personal stories. I'm thankful, so thankful for it, but I'm curious why you decided to, how you felt comfortable enough to do that, say some of those things in public.
I think I just became a grouch. No, but seriously, I realized, there are people who have large followings who maybe drop one message every once in a while, like, hey, go mental health. Yeah. And, while that's encouraging, people don't really feel comfortable talking about it publicly. And I'm like, I've been through some stuff that I think is really important that other people know about, that they're not alone. And every once in a while, I post things, I share some things, and sometimes end up feeling pretty terrible for a day or two after, because it's either very personal or some people message me and try to convince me that I'm wrong about various aspects. Right. And it can be rough, but almost always when I share some of those personal stories, I get a message from somebody who's like, I was finding, I just need somebody to talk to, and I'm able to talk to them.
It's from my understanding, it's something where if you have some experience with it and you're willing to talk about it, some people need help that way. They need somebody who's gone through something that they've gone through. And it's why I'm so thankful for you sharing some of that stuff, because it's helped me relate to people who I care a lot about in a way that I wasn't able to before. So thank you for that.
I think that a lot of the times, the big stories that everybody knows are the ones that are the tragedies,
Right.
the ones that are highly negative.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas largely, I don't think that needs to be the case. To know that somebody out there has been at very low spots, but has managed to get through them and is mostly living good at this point, I think can be helpful. And honestly, the more that we can talk about things and not make them as serious, I think is helpful. The fact that I can joke a little bit about my own mental illness is helpful for me. It's healing for me. Sure, some people might think that it's maybe not as kosher to do, but honestly, I feel like humor is absolutely a needed part of healing.
Absolutely. And speaking about some of that humor, if you ever, one of the ways that I think I found you and your stream and all that kind of stuff was some of the voices that you would do on various runs, whether they're at GDQs or for my own run. When did you start doing some of these voices? Has that been something that you've lived with your whole life?
I mean, I did improv, so I always did dumb voices, at least ever since high school. Nice. I don't think. I don't know why. I was a very monotone person when I was growing up.
So surprising. I can't believe that. I can't imagine that Brossentia.
Yeah, but that was me back in the day. And I found that, I like to make people laugh, and doing weird, stupid voices is always something that can work. And, just jumping into a little bit of the character, playing around with that, it's almost, I suppose it's a small bit of improv just on the spot, putting together voices, but at the same time, it's just fun. It makes me laugh. It makes me have fun.
It's the way you enjoy playing the game. Right, exactly. It's do what you do. Oh my God, that's the best. That by the way, that advice comes up so often. When you start streaming or when you start speedrunning, do stuff that's fun for you. Like that's just like the ultimate piece of advice.
Oh yeah, I'm imagining if you're Michelle Obama, you're probably not going to come on stream and be like, hey, let me tell you about the chickens in my backyard. No, be Michelle Obama, okay? Go ahead and be polite and maybe make some angry faces occasionally, and you've got it, okay? But don't fake who you are. Don't put on an act unless you just naturally do that all the time anyway. I think that the more you stream, the more you get comfortable with yourself, and the more that you find what is fun for you to do. And honestly, there are times where there's dialogue up on the screen and I'm like, there's just so much. I'm not reading all of this. No, it's not worth it. Just get through it quickly. But then there are other times, that it's fun for me. Do what you enjoy.
I can't remember what RPG I was playing through, but I made the mistake of starting to do voices, and by about an hour and 15 minutes in, my voice, I just couldn't talk anymore. I had gone through so much I tried doing voices. I'm like, nope, this, not for me. But I'm glad there are people like you who do that.
Well, I have the same thing happen quite a bit, honestly, especially if they're RPGs. I start doing voices, and then half an hour in, I'm like, oh, I'm so bored. I just want to get through all this dialogue and get to the fun part. So
absolutely. Okay.
Do what you like.
So any speedrunning projects that you plan on taking on in the future? Have you made any choices, or just see what's happening? What's next?
There are a few things that are going on right now. Next week, Corndan and I, Corndan is somebody who is on my channel quite a bit, giving out games and doing commentary. We're going to be starting a show that's called Don't Make Us Bored, which essentially is putting on a show with people running various games or doing high score attempts, or just essentially if they have something that they think would be entertaining, we'll put them on. And if we're bored, then we take them off. And that's the only rule. Don't make us bored. Yeah.
I saw you tweet about this, and I love this idea. I can't wait to watch this. Maybe even, I was trying to think of something I might even submit to this, because I thought it's such an awesome idea.
Well, I mean, I've talked to other people, and there's a very real possibility we're going to have somebody play some Carmen Sandiego. And yeah, the rule is after 10 minutes, if we're bored, we move on to the next thing. And odds are that's going to be, well, especially since there are really specific versions of Carmen Sandiego. I think that one was North Dakota. where in North Dakota is Carmen Sandiego, and nobody cares. Okay, we don't care about North Dakota. That's like a universal thing in the entire country. I don't think North Dakota cares about North Dakota. But anyways, I'll be excited if we do see that, to watch 10 minutes and then shut them down and say, we're bored. We're moving on to the next one. But, people going into it often will know that it's not going to be the most entertaining, and that's fine. I still love being able to give people a small stage to have a snapshot of a game, even if they find it interesting and know nobody else will. It still is fun to me.
I totally agree with you, and I can't wait to watch. I think there's gonna be some really fun and interesting stuff, and it's only 10 minutes. How are you gonna get bored of 10 minutes? If we're not bored at that point, then you're probably gonna be good to go for a little while longer. Exactly.
Yeah. In addition, I think I'm going to start working on Rad Gravity for speedrunning, which is a really bad NES game, but I love it.
Gong Zero, speedrunning gong show. That's exactly what I was thinking, Gong Zero, but we date ourselves when we make that reference.
Well, no, it's essentially what we've been thinking of. Everybody knows Gong Show to one degree or another, and it'll be essentially like that, but because speedrunning is such a different thing and a lot of runs can take a few minutes to get into it, we're not going to gong after 1 minute. 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, gong.
There's got to be a game. There's got to be a game you can gong after 1 minute. I'm sure it's out there.
Well, yeah, Pink Jelly for the NES, the most boring game that exists.
I've never heard of this one. Now I have to go watch this. This sounds.
Well, that's because it's a crappy bootleg that has absolutely no inspiration. Okay, it's not fun to play.
Once again, not fun.
There's no enjoyment. So.
Awesome. Okay, so as we start to wrap this thing up, somebody did ask Quasi, how does one apply, or how would they get involved in Kusogrande if they wanted to participate in the future?
In general, because we have signups usually towards the end of the year, I would say best thing is to follow me on Twitter or join the Kusogrande Discord. It's just, I believe, discord.gg/Kusogrande. We'll always have announcements there. I have announcements on Twitch as well. So, if you are joining the community and talking to people around it, we'll definitely talk about signups.
God, yes. Does Bro have a sound effect picked out yet for...
I've been working on that, okay? I'm also working on graphics.
Hey, it's going to have a whole thing. Look at this. That's great.
You gotta have graphics, okay?
I love the Kusogrande logo. I think it's awesome. Speaking of that, where would people watch Kusogrande? Where can they find you? Where can they watch your stream if they're interested?
Over at twitch.tv/Brossentia.
I'm sorry. No, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry.
I don't know what I was going to say.
Oh, dang it. It's going to be something. I just ruined the thought. No, I don't know.
Yeah, shame on you.
Dang it. I will say... Do yourself a favor too and follow him on Twitter, because as I mentioned, it's really great stuff. Bro doesn't mind commenting on things that are happening in our community and stuff like that, and I appreciate his openness and willingness to discuss with people. As civil as a discussion as you can have on Twitter, he engages on Twitter, which I really do appreciate as well. I think that's pretty cool.
I try to keep things civil.
Mostly. Unless people are being turds, and then there's not those. Some people are just like that.
Yeah. It takes a lot of work to know who's going to be a troll and who's not, and I think even the greatest internet wizards are going to fall for that trick every once in a while,
Well, yeah, I know, man. And on that upbeat note, thank you so much for taking the time and going through all this stuff. It's been really a joy and a pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, sure thing.
Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching. If you're enjoying the podcast, subscribe, leave a review. All those things go a long way to helping out the podcast. If you'd like to continue the conversation, I'm on Twitter @LatMackey, or you can also join the LatMackey Discord, where we have a sequence break channel. We talk about guests, we have questions. It's really interactive, really fun. Please feel free to stop on by. Thanks so much. See you in the next one.